I'm curious about, this is fascinating. I love hearing this from someone who also does interviews, because I don't have a lot of people that do similar things as me on here, which is fascinating. This might get you in a little trouble, but, and I know every artist that you've had on has been inspiring in their own way.
Oh, it's the list. It's the who's the most.
It's not the who's the most. It's the, because everyone will ask me like, who's your favorite guest? And it's actually.
I am, obviously.
Exactly, right?
But I tell you, not because of me, because I'm the one today.
You're right now.
Yeah.
And it's not a favorite guest question, because I don't think that's fair.
Yeah.
But the three artists that really spoke to you, and maybe in an emotional way, yes, they all do, obviously, but maybe something was on your heart and mind that season of your life where they said something that really spoke to you. Maybe it connected to you with your family or your career or something from your past, or where they said something or their energy or their presence that day was really memorable for you. And of course, every artist you've had on is amazing and talented and great, but this top three artist moments or memories in those interviews, if you could share.
I mean, I can't do a top three because, I mean, I've been doing it, like you say, 30 years. And I mean, I don't have the fuel to get me back that far to remember
that much.
Right? I'd run out around 2012,
Sure.
you know what I mean? I've got to go back to 1997.
It's a lot, but just a few moments.
Yeah. I mean, look, you know, I mean, dude, I mean, I had to dry my eyes the other day. I was having this really deep conversation with someone, and they talked about bottoming out, and with Josh from Queens, and what it is to find the courage to carry on, and that hit me, right? But I think in terms of sort of, I mean, the last Tom York conversation I had was one of the very few times I've ever watched anything I've done, been a part of, back in full. Because I'd waited my whole life as a fan to have that kind of unobstructed, pure conversation with him. You know, we'd had good conversations in the past, and very awkward ones in the 90s and the 2000s when Radiohead were just holding on. They're just holding on, right? Because the whole world was like, what does Radiohead think? And they're like, we're just holding on, just trying to make the best art we can, you know. Interviews are not our friend, you know. But that was for me, it was wrapped up. I had very little sleep. I had no sleep. I had the worst jet lag ever. Some reason I found myself in a total tailspin. I'd flown in the day before from LA to London. It's not a good jet lag. I had stayed up till like 7 a.m. just spinning out about this conversation. I got about 2 hours sleep, woke up. It was a morning conversation, which was good. It was good because I actually had a tailwind of like, you just got to do it. Had a couple of very strong cups of coffee, had another one at the pub, which was they just closed down for us, sat down. He sat down and he was just in amazing form.
Oh, that's great.
And very generous with me. And so that to me was like a moment, and other artists have talked to me about that moment. That was a moment for me when it was emotional for me because I just had been waiting to have just this really genuine, it's all on the table, we can talk about it, conversation with him. And he was really generous with me and very enthusiastic to be there.
Beautiful.
It was beautiful. And I was so scared, and it turned out to be the opposite. That was beautiful. I think probably when Hayley Williams and I had our first real proper deep conversation about therapy and about the work that she was doing at the time and may still be, I mean, you never stop doing the work. And I was getting back into my therapy and everything else. We had some really great conversations that were very moving. And I think it's where I kind of had to learn to let artists be emotional. My job was I felt always to steer them away from that.
Mm.
And
that's just the good stuff is though.
Yeah, I know. But I was scared that it was like, I felt like I was emotionally mugging people, you know what I mean? By letting them get emotional in my space.
Right.
And actually it's just not up to me to make that decision at all. It's nothing to do with me. So that was that was a great moment. And you know, anytime that sort of the parental influence in particular right now comes up, is pretty sort of deep for me because my relationship with my mother in particular was changing. You know, she has dementia, and so I don't have the same relationship I had with her. and whatever answers I needed on why our relationship was amazing, but also challenging at times, are gone. I'm not going to get any more answers, right? So whatever I got to go on now, I got to go on. So, but she's still here and it's awesome. And so I'm grateful for every minute I spend with her and the times I get to kind of have these little moments of cognitive awareness, and we laugh a lot and there's tears, and it's a brilliant human experience for all of the sadness attached to that really awful disease.
Yeah.
Whenever I get into conversations and the parental thing comes up, you know, I gotta take a sharp breath on that and just stay composed, because the thing is, Lewis, like when you get to a place when you're trying to get as inside the human experience as possible, right? Whether it's through music or you cover such a broad spectrum of people's interests and things that affect the world. It's hard for it to not sometimes tap into something you're going through. And so it's just knowing when you want to allow yourself to go there. And I mean, you must feel this too.
Oh man. I mean, even you just sharing that story about your mom, how long has that been happening for?
You know, the symptoms came on about 4 years ago. Maybe we started to notice, but in 2019 it became quite evident. And then we were still traveling around. I was taking her on road trips, and I flew home to New Zealand for one night to take her to U2 because she couldn't really go on her own. And so I wanted to give her, because that was her favorite band. I wanted to give her that experience. She had a great night, and then quarantine kicked in, and that was that. And the next time I saw her, everything had changed. You know, because I think it's pretty well established that quarantine and isolation was not good for those who are dealing with cognitive issues. And isolation is not.
It's tricky.
You need the stimulation, you know.
Man, yeah, I mean, I have a story that's close to the heart for me. My father actually got in a car accident in New Zealand and had a severe brain trauma, and they had to cut the car open. They helicoptered him to a hospital in Christchurch.
Yeah.
And for 17 years was alive, but not emotionally, mentally here. So it wasn't dementia, but it was a brain trauma where every time I would see him, it's like, where'd you go to school again? He could speak and have a conversation, but he didn't have memory. And he emotionally and mentally wasn't the same human being. There were moments of that humor and like some of the personality, but it was almost like he was a different human being. So this was close to home for me. He passed away a little over a year ago. And for 17 years, I did my best. It was almost like, again, he was alive, but emotionally gone, mentally gone. And so I wasn't able to fully grieve the loss of my father as I knew him because he was still physically here. And it's been a journey of grieving and almost feeling closer to him now that he's physically not here, because I don't have that struggle and barrier anymore. And so it's close to my heart with this.
I can relate to that in my own way. It's about investment, right? It's the time and the energy you put into whatever's changing, whatever's going on around you that allows you to try to get as much out of it as possible.
Absolutely,
right?
man.
And you know, my brother and I often talk about the times we spend with mum, even though sometimes it's really hard to kind of feel that we can even be present for her.
It's challenging.
But even when we just leave and we go have a beer, we just toast and say, man, she's bringing us together. Like, she's still giving us reasons to stay together and to come together and to talk and to process and to work things through. And so that's a hard one. And
it's tricky,
I'm
man.
sorry that he moved on, but
it was tricky, and it was challenging because it was, for the first 4 or 5 years, it was like I thought he was going to get better, and it just didn't really happen. I mean, maybe moments of it, but he was never able to get back to a fraction of who he was, his personality and his energy and he was, intellectual. He just didn't have it anymore because of the brain trauma. So
can I ask you a question on that?
Yep.
So if you sort of take a look at the overall experience of that era of your relationship with your father, from the moment that he was who you knew him to be versus who he became, what did you learn about life in its most kind of micro potent way?
the challenge is I had to learn how to hold like two things in my hands at the same time, like extreme sadness, pain, and agony, but also like the beauty that comes from that. And there's no way that I would be where I'm at without that accident happening, because in a lot of ways, I didn't have the emotional courage, because my father was able to support me emotionally, mentally, sometimes financially. I was in college, right? So it's not like I had a career and I was doing my thing. He was kind of like, okay, if things don't work out, like I can go work with my dad, you know what I mean? And he'll make sure that I'm like taken care of and I'll get paid and have a job.
Yeah.
So when he was not able to support me in any way, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, financially, it was like, oh, I need to become something greater. I need to figure out life. And I don't have him to, I wouldn't say baby me, but to like make sure that I'm taken care of. And so it's tragic. And there were so many other tragic things around it. It was just all tragic. I don't think there was anything good about the situation. But who I became, and I just cared deeply about human beings and the human condition and human psychology. And it's one of the reasons why I started this show, was because I was just fascinated by humans, and I knew I needed a lot to learn myself. And so I wanted to find the greatest mentors that I could, because I didn't have my mentor anymore, to learn from, to soak it in. And I was doing this for 4 or 5 years before I started this show. And I was getting so much value from these conversations that I was like, I need to record these and just put them out there. So there is beauty for me from what I had to overcome and learn and who I became in this journey of that accident. But it was also extreme sadness and loss and tragedy.
Did you ever hear or see Colbert, the 2-minute piece where he talks about loving life and loving all of it?
Yeah,
where he gets
emotional. I think, yeah.
So that would be the third example of that for me, was when I sat with Fred again and he played me his reworked version of that speech with just some really beautiful drones that Eno inspired, influenced him, and he's a prodigy of Eno, and just these beautiful, very delicate drones. Wow. And played that speech, and that was saying what you're saying, which is the idea of like, we're always one step behind change, but it's what do you do with it?
Yeah.
And how do you apply it? And it's, man, we are so fragile as a species.
Any moment, man. This was a moment. Happened in 1 second, he got in a car accident. It was a moment, and the rest of his life and everyone in his life changed.
Yeah.
One of the greatest pieces of advice I got was from another mentor, friend of mine, named Jason. 2.5 years ago, he said, hey, I know you're going through this challenge with your dad. And I didn't know if he was going to live. We didn't think he was going to survive 17 years ago, right? I thought he was in a coma for 3 months in Christchurch. We didn't know he woke up eventually. And I didn't know every year, he had so many health problems after that. I didn't know if he was going to survive or pass every year. But he just kept chugging along for 17 years. And I go, man, he's a stubborn son of a gun, And my mentor, Jason, one of my friends, he said, but he was in Ohio, my dad, and I'm in LA. And I'd go back once a year, maybe twice, to go visit him, right? But it was just hard. It's just hard to see him and just process the same conversation every time.
Yeah, it's a real tough
father
one.
not knowing really.
Well, also you have this kind of built-in, not to interrupt, you have this built-in kind of sense of responsibility and ultimately guilt of not being more present, but at the same time, it's like, why would you consistently put yourself through this pain, right?
Sadness, constant pain, which I did for the first 4 or 5 years, seeing constantly, and it's just like, this is. And he said, listen, you should go see your father more frequently. Like, make it a point to go there. If you're going once a year, go there 3-4 times a year. Just do it. Like, even if he doesn't appreciate it, I'm telling you, you will appreciate it in the future. And if he can't express it, he still appreciates it. Because he never called me after this accident. He never acted like he cared. And he didn't want to be around his kids anymore. Whereas before that, he wanted to be around us all the time. So it was just a big transformation, big change. And so I made a commitment to do that. And this was during the pandemic when I did this, actually, when it was less convenient to travel and less convenient to go. And I did it, and I asked him every question I could. And I filmed as many things. I almost interviewed him and as much as I could and asked him every question. And every once in a while, there was actually a little nugget in there. Most of it was kind of, all over the place. But every once in a while, I was like, a little nugget in there, and I have those memories. And then he passed the next year. And so I was really grateful that I invested that time, that I made it the effort to go there, not knowing that it would be his time.
No, because it's scary, and I think we, you know,
It is
look,
scary.
we are quite simple. We're as complex as we are as a species. We're quite simple. It's like pain equals bad, right? So regardless of the incentive and the emotional need to go do that, and the knowledge that it's the right thing to do, it's painful for me.
It is, man.
It's painful. So there must be a reason why I can't go this week, right?
There's always a
There's always a
excuse.
excuse, right? And it's total. I think it's very normal, and I think getting over that pain barrier is really important, because then you get into a place where you face these things down, you invest in the reality, and being invested in your reality, no matter what it is, ultimately is the closest we can get to being ready for the entire unknown.
Exactly, man.
And you know, it's different for you because you've built this amazing experience where people want to come into this room with you. You've established through really thoughtful, great conversation and very smart kind of complementary branding and everything else. It's like, oh, I want to go on there.